want to problematize the idea that homosexuality, transsexuality, is natural. I met a neurobiologist recently, someone who studies trans brains. One of the many trying to use science for good to find some kind of empirical evidence that the trans brain is natural. Trying to translate the potential of scientific breakthrough onto the political. Karen Barad asks us to think about what quantum field theory has to offer to queer and trans imaginaries. A theory that rests upon evidence of the indeterminacy of matter, quantum field theory breaks down the presuppositions of being in the way that we understand it. It works to de-essentialize the way that we understand particles. Electrons do not have essence. There are no male electrons or female electrons. Electrons don't have any reverence for binaries. They are rather a totality of indeterminacy. The subatomic particles that make up our bodies can't even be determinate, so why must something as silly as sex organs be the material for understanding our roles in the social? A non-binary theoretical physicist would certainly be the one to stretch new theories of materiality to cover queer political imaginations. Now that we have more queer and trans people in the world of technoscience, new articulations can inform these discoveries that are meant to ontologize queer existence, to make it materially tangible, scientifically amenable, and allied. But just because science is being done by a queer doesn't mean the science itself is queer. It doesn't mean there is suddenly a good science. The idea is that if you collect enough data, if you can amass an observable base of evidence upon which you can convince people of your right to exist, then maybe we can know peace. We can orient ourselves toward justice. We can justify our belonging. We can learn the language of science all we want. We can immerse ourselves in it, go native, as anthropologists would say. But what happens when we find the gay gene, or the trans gene, or any marker of deviance from the cisgender heterosexual imperative? What happens when we give access to queerness through empirical means? A queerness that has a real, tangible, defined presence in the world. A source code. Wendy Hui-Kang Chun writes on the concurrent development of software and genetic terminology. Referencing the work of historian Lily Kay, molecular biology shifted toward a form of information thinking in the 1950s. Our genetic material is metaphorically conceived of as code, indicating on and off switches, circuitry that's awaiting an input. This rhetorical software creates a frame of scientific thinking that makes sense of the world by drawing analogies between our material beings and some kind of invisible source code, a determinate, logical system that can be discovered. The debates on the gay gene taking form are invested in this existence of a source code. Tim Murphy's 1997 book, Gay Science, unpacks some of the ethical debates around searching for empirical evidence for same-sex attraction through various forms of science. Geneticists currently support the existence of polygenic contributors to the expressions of same-sex attraction. Ensuing concerns about the eugenic possibilities of isolating genetic codes for sexual attraction have marked the landscape of the science of sex. In tow, neurological research on trans brains supports the idea that transgender individuals have brain structural alterations that mark them as different from cisgender individuals. All the while, the anti-trans and anti-LGBTQ+ political actors are playing on offense. The legislative front, led by the GOP, doesn't care about whether or not we are natural or naturalized. It doesn't matter if developments in science further support our existence, or destabilize the determinacy of quantum physics, or prove a manifest neurochemical difference in trans brains. World-making through science is a possibility, not a promise. Let's think about the history. When developments in endocrinology led to the establishment of the phenotype of sex, a dimorphic male-female binary was codified into medical literatures. A norm was established along which providers could imagine their patients. Psychoanalysts like Sigmund Freud would then conceive of homosexuality as inversion, a term that came before the establishment of homosexuality in mid-20th century diagnostic literature. They could be treated and brought into accordance with the normative heterosexuality through psychotherapies. Transsexuals were expected to fit one sex or the other, and if they were not seen to be good candidates, they would not be allowed treatment. They would also be expected to adopt heterosexuality, as this was the normal form of sexuality, no matter what the sex assigned at birth was. All of these factors worked toward the establishment of a normal form of man, one that was established in medical literatures as not abnormal. A moralized economic form of man emerged alongside a biocentric descriptive statement of man, what Sylvia Wynter would call man too. A positive, scientific form of man enabled the creation of a species class of human. Man could be ordered in tables, sorted according to their functions in the social. A science of the social enabled the classification of the homosexual and then the transsexual. Both of these specifications took a more contemporary form in diagnostic manuals to be managed by allopathic medicine. Thus, the identities of those we would not lump into LGBTQ+ communities would become consolidated as such by technologies of ordering and managing. The technologies of software, of programming and computing, stand as a manifestation of a logic world, a mechanized unconscious that ontologizes a being in the world as queer, as biocentric, as technologically determinate, as maintained by whatever political technical economy we exist within at the time. We are mediated through archives of medical literature, through the program of our genetic code, through telecommunications, through literary works that open queer world-making capabilities. Many of us are not born into a family system that teaches us about our difference. Many queer and trans people must learn about themselves and their identities through mediation. This mediation makes for a great many possibilities as queer people. It also limits and constrains the way that we understand desire, sexuality, gender, and sociality. If we expect science to save us, to lend us legitimacy, we're going to be shocked when anti-science emerges, as it already has. We cannot rely upon a conception of identity that attempts to naturalize and de-technologize. We've always been constructed alongside technology. We are denaturalized in being conceived as technological. The body modifications that enable certain forms of gender expression do not want for naturalization. They want for an acceptance of the cyborg. They want for recognition of man as technological. A techno-faggotry that resists naturalization. But all identities have been mediated in some way, shape, or form. This is not to argue that mediation is bad, is good. Mediation simply is. It's a fact of our lives. And there are some forms of mediation that afford different things, different capabilities. As I see it, conceiving of the human body and all of its random potential and all of its infinite possibilities is limited in thinking about the body as if it were some kind of pre-programmed organism. I argue here for a conception of queerness as both technological and natural, to think of the natural origins of so much of the technological, the practical application of knowledge. And while we may use these technologies to extend our ways of knowing and thinking, we must recognize the ways that they also compress the ways that we know and the ways that we think. And how if we allow these technologies to put parameters on the ways that we conceive of ourselves, then we're only selling ourselves short.